name is Leigh Feaviour. As I said, worked in BT 31 years now. Had various roles the last 15, kind of half the career, largely managing transformation programs in BT, typically in the technology space. I'm currently accountable for the technology delivery of the HR transformation program. I've been on the program since March. Towards the end, I'll show you a real high-level plan of what that program's about, and it's been running a lot longer than that, so I've not been here at the beginning, since the beginning rather, but I hope I've still got some useful insights that I can share. As I say, Stuart's already kind of covered the direction of travel in the industry, and what I'm intending to do here is to just give you a real life example of where BT is now in its HR transformation journey. And yeah, as I say, I recognise certainly a lot of synergies, so I'm hopeful that we're all nicely aligned. And just to note, the transformation program within BT is massive, like you'd expect, far too much for me to really cover in much detail. So I'm focusing today primarily, as the title says, on the colleague experience, which is central to how we're driving the change. There's challenges top to bottom in terms of culture, systems, etc., etc. But the thing that I'm focusing on, and again, I was quite pleased to hear that at least called employee experience, colleague experience, is what we've chosen in BT. But that certainly featured a lot in Stuart's pitch as well. So I'm happy to see that too. As I say, most of the content today, I'll just be honest, I can take little credit for it because it was generated at the beginning of the program. We're in delivery now, which is where I kind of fit in, but it's paying dividends for me. So I think it's still a worthwhile set of artifacts to share with you. So this first slide, I won't dwell for too long on. This kind of sets the context for change. Hopefully familiar to most people if we've got HR practitioners on the call, and especially with what Stuart's already said. We're talking about the future of work on the left-hand side. I would say that's kind of more like the current world of work, really. It's certainly moving much more, demographics constantly changing, technology constantly increasing people's expectations. So companies, organisations that want the best talent, I think, are having to compete harder, not just pay more, but they have to provide an experience for employees that are going to be compelling and want people to work there. The skills that we need from our people in BT are changing, will continue to change for the foreseeable forever, I expect. And we need to be able to organise ourselves around those changing needs, and therefore need HR systems that can keep up with that. As I say, colleagues' expectations are changing. People, just people are used to experiences that are responsive, personalised, data-driven, mobile-ready, all the things that they expect as a consumer in the real world, they expect from their employer as well. And if you don't provide them that, then you are potentially not competitive to retain the sort of key talent that we need to hold on to, and employees will look elsewhere. Now, COVID, I don't think has materially changed that. It was mentioned previously as well, but I definitely think it's accelerated it. It's made people think a lot more about it. We were heading in that direction anyway. But as before, those companies that had the agility already in their systems, I think, have coped a lot better. And that's not just HR systems, that's kind of across the board, but those employers that were able to respond to people suddenly all working from home, I think, are in a much better place. And now, so with COVID, lots of people, and I talk again from the BT angle, we've got lots of people working from home, as you'd expect, but we've got lots of people being onboarded directly into working from home. So it's one thing to just work in the office and then say, now you need to work from home for a few months because we've got this pandemic. I think it's an entirely different thing just to bring in a brand new employee and say, look at a graduate scheme when we've got like a few hundred people joining all at the same time, and trying to onboard them directly into their home environment is a real challenge. So certainly COVID has accelerated the need to look at these kind of things. But as I said, I don't think it's really fundamentally changed the direction of travel. In BT, we have, and I'll now get onto our particular problem. We have, as I mentioned in answering the earlier question, quite a large distributed set of HR systems. We have separate systems for starters for BT, for EE, and for PlusNet. And within those, just looking at BT, we have a really complex architecture that's grown over time. We needed a new feature here, a new feature there, and they've all been added and bolted onto the side. And we now end up with something which is technically functional, but it's not really optimal in terms of the cost and effort to support it. and being responsive enough to meet those changing demands and expectations that I mentioned before. Basically, it's just too inflexible. It's not what you would call a modern systems estate, and that makes it expensive. So, let's be real about it. Cost is always a factor as well. And the more complicated something is, the harder it is to support it. And also, from an employee perspective, the more wasted time there is. So that's the cost in that. If you're having to rekey data into multiple different places because you don't have a fully data-driven integrated architecture, then there's a cost to that too. So the intention of that slide and that monologue really was just to say we need to change. That's what's driving our HR transformation program. And in order to transform the HR function, clearly, based on what I've said, a key enabler is needing to transform the systems. We need to be able to do more effective resource planning, more effective recruitment at lower cost, better targeted learning, so that we can find and retain the scarce skills, not have to rely so much on external labour for them, all of that. So hopefully we can see that the need is there. How we did it. So this is the approach that we took within BT. We built the transformation program under 4 key missions, which in practical terms they actually all relate to each other. They all sit under the BT values, which are personal, simple, and brilliant. But the 4 kind of foundational missions are digital foundations initially. We knew, and again this was called out in the HR 3.0 piece. We knew we needed to move from predominantly on-prem architecture to cloud-based, which gives us that flexibility and scalability and all the things that we know that cloud typically brings. To get that enables us to, or will enable us to provide the capabilities we know we need today, but also to be able to meet those tomorrow, keep up with future demands. We wanted to move towards a more kind of plug and play architecture again, so that and cloud and the associated applications that we can plug in kind of gives us that ability to plug in and then take out things as we need them. And also, and I think this was slightly alluded to earlier too, we have an ambition to move to make the product, as in the system solution, more owned by the HR function than by IT. There'll still be a need for IT to provide support. We're organised within BT with a technology arm that does all the systems development and support. But we wanted to provide for HR this cloud-based architecture with all the standardisation that it brings to really give HR the ownership and the accountability to sort of map their own destiny and only call into IT when necessary by exception. There will, of course, be other downstream systems that we have to integrate and support and continue to do so, but really putting the power in the hands of HR. Colleague experience, how's time? Colleague experience is what I'm mostly going to cover in the rest of this presentation, so I won't dwell too much on this slide, but basically it's the approach that we took to ensure that we captured the things that mattered most to the colleagues. If we're going to spend an awful lot of money on an HR transformation, we need to make sure we're spending it giving them the best experience possible. So we've taken a really colleague-centric approach, which as I say I'll describe in a mo. Service-oriented is effectively, as I say, these all build and relate to each other. That extends the colleague experience to say that we're treating their colleagues, our line managers, our HR professionals as customers. So we want to give everybody as near as possible that kind of e-commerce experience that they would expect as customers of other organisations. They become our customers within the company. So we're trying to give them intuitive solutions with self-service, what people expect as a consumer. And then the only way that that's possible, this is really foundational as well, is data-led. We can only provide self-service, personalisation, and all of those good things if we have clean, accurate, reliable, timely data. So kind of a given that could almost go as a horizontal below all those other things. Better data will also give HR and line managers the ability to make more evidence-based decisions. Those insights will allow us to make decisions more accurately. And data is just fundamental and also very challenging. So again, with the distributed architecture that we have, we know that data is a problem. It doesn't always match across all the different areas. And so having a real focus on what we do about data when approaching this transformation was really key. And then, so at the bottom, we get all that right. simple, you may say. Get all of that right, and what we aim to create will be this leaner and more efficient HR function, which will allow us to decommission a lot of legacy applications. That will simplify the user experience because we've got a fewer number of touch points, doing more, giving our colleagues a more personalised and more intuitive experience. The decommissioning will lower the support costs and remove the unnecessary administrative costs of rekeying the same data into multiple systems, for example. So that's kind of like the overall approach that we took in BT. This is kind of how do we then boil that down into defining what good looks like for our colleagues. So as I mentioned before, we approached the HR transformation program with the requirement, the need of the program is to provide an amazing colleague experience, right? So we need to really differentiate ourselves and make our employers or our colleagues want to work here, make people want to join the company, not want to leave. So we took a human-centered design approach, which is actually how we do all of our IT deliveries in BT anyway, but it really is impactful here to ensure that we really understood what matters to our colleagues, understanding the journeys that colleagues make through BT, and by doing so, we can then understand what matters to them to increase the engagement with those colleagues, and obviously, as I say, hopefully increase our retention and deliver all the other benefits that I covered. So the principles on the slide in brief. Discovery, detailed discovery. This is all about working with colleagues. Let's not pretend as we used to do project management, 10 years ago. We know what we want to do. We'll just do it. We don't. So let's work with our colleagues and really understand what their unique needs are, so that we know we're giving them what will meaningfully help them. Empathize kind of comes in the same bucket really, but we're not just talking to them. We really want to understand why it is that they're saying what they're saying. Don't just say I want a better experience in XYZ, but really understand what's driving that motivation, so that we can be sure that we're delivering solutions that will meet those needs. Co-creating the roadmap is kind of all the same thing really. It's saying as we go through, we're not just going to ask them a bunch of questions, run off, and then develop something and hope that it meets the needs. We'll keep those touch points along the way, so that we can keep checking back and making sure that we are continuing to deliver what is needed and expected. And then the iterative, that might sound iterative, but this is more about the delivery being iterative. So we're having squads accountable for the different areas of functionality, who will design, build, and deliver in an iterative fashion, starting with a minimal viable product. So again, I think I've got time to cover why that's a good thing, but so that in brief, so that we can first off, drive value early, get something out there and get some value, and then we can course correct if needed. So we can then test with real users again. Is this actually giving value? Do we carry on, or do we slightly change direction to provide more value? So that's kind of the overall approach. Time again. How did we do that? In brief, we very, very deep and direct colleague research is probably the summary. So we captured people's individual sort of hopes, needs, wants, aspirations, etc. With, the question is, how do we had to capture those, but we have over 100,000 people in the organisation, and so we cannot hope to ask all of them. So we have to broadly generalise what people need, and we did that with tools that probably most people are familiar with. We started with focus labs to map typical journeys through BT. So just take what are the steps that a person in general would go through from starting BT all the way through to leaving it. And then we did more sort of drilled much more into the detail, again working with colleagues to map to get more data, to map themes and hypotheses over those journeys, to try and start to test what is it that people want to see, what will improve that experience through the company. With further research, using at this point a much broader group of people across all lines of business. So we tested this across the entire company. We distilled the findings. So we've mapped a journey. We've kind of got what are the points in that journey, and then we distilled those into what we call moments that matter, which are the really important parts of the journey, which I'll talk about in the next slide actually. Tested it back, and then effectively engaged with our colleagues throughout. So we can really be confident that what we're trying to deliver, if we still have to deliver it, what we're trying to deliver is going to be real and important to the colleagues, and personas as well. So putting virtual names to the challenges and the people, the groups of people that we've been talking with, just kind of helps to make it feel really personal and to drive the personalised approach, which is fundamentally what we're trying to deliver. So then once we had all of those artifacts, then we have to sort of map them into an approach to put them into a delivery. How do we turn that into a transformation program? So let me just skip to, I mentioned moments that matter, and I think this is quite an important one. This is quite a high level slide. Clearly there's a lot more that goes under it, but throughout the colleague research, as I mentioned, we examined all parts of the journey. There's only part of it here. We focused, as I said, we went from joining to leaving, but we focused most of our effort on between joining and contributing. That the sort of the moving within BT and then ultimately rolling off and leaving were part of our research, but not really the areas that necessarily needed the laser focus to improve. For what's hopefully fairly obvious reasons. So within these key areas here, the high level steps or elements of the journey, through the research, we then pulled out what are the moments, what are the touch points or the elements of those journeys which have a disproportionately high impact, positively or negatively at the moment, on our employees' experience, our colleagues' experience. And those are the things that we know we want to pay most attention to. So as I say, this is high level. Obviously, you can go under there. We can look at I apply, for example, and there are 5 steps in there. We've picked out 2, which is the application itself and then being kept engaged throughout the process. Drill under that, and we've got more detail as to what it actually means. But the point is, we're trying to understand what are the real important areas that, if we could only improve those pink boxes, would have a really big material effect, positive effect on all of the colleagues working in BT. So I am conscious of time, so I don't have much more, but I'm starting to rattle through. The experience map was then created following the moments that matter, effectively including the moments that matter. And this is more of an end state. I would like, we didn't really call it this, but I would liken this to the colleague experience vision for the program. So this is effectively taking all of the data that I've mentioned before. We've defined the sort of the life cycle. We've drilled that down into all of the elements. We've picked out of there the moments that matter. We've applied personas over the top so that we can give it life. And then plotting all of that onto this colleague experience map that shows that life cycle, but with lots and lots of rich data sitting behind it, so that we can just, and this is a really good communication tool to keep testing back and saying, if we deliver this, if we can get to a point where what's written on the screen here, which I'm sure you can't read because it's far too small, but take my word for it, there's the detail there. If we can deliver that, life for our people in BT will be substantially better and more easy to manage than it is today. So that's the idea of that. This is just a high level. It might be of interest. This is where we're at in the plan so far. So all of the colleague research is in this sort of pink colour at the top of the plan, and it's really just showing we took an awful lot of time really fully understanding what it is that our colleagues needed, so that before we even started engaging and doing any development at all, we understood all of that, and then we then started delivering a couple of capabilities in learning and contingent worker, learning being probably the more pertinent here for our colleague experience. And again, it was one that was mentioned previously by Stuart as being important. It was certainly one of our moments that matter, or included some. So we started doing that early based on the moments that matter to get some business value. We needed to start paying back and showing some transformational change. And then, and it'll be the final point based on time, we then once we were kind of midway through that delivery, we paused all of the other development. And back to my earlier point of, if you're going to make a real transformational change, you've really got to grab the nettle and do something big. So we delivered a new learning capability, or are delivering a new learning capability now. While that's going on, we stopped all the other development and said we really need to face up to our whole core HR system is needing to be changed. So, and actually that's ×3 because of the three areas, BTE and PlusNet, as I mentioned. So to get real value, we've really got to approach this as a big transformational approach. So we need to select a new core HR system and a partner to help us to deliver it. because it's going to be a huge change. And yes, in the interest of time, suffice to say that all of those artifacts that we used were really that we created as part of that colleague experience were really pivotal in getting us through that selection phase, which actually by most standards, I think running an ITT for a new core HR system and a partner to deliver it, and the kind of time frame we're talking here since June, and we've just completed both, is, well, certainly in my experience, that's pretty fast. We're still going through final due diligence, mobilization, planning and all of that kind of stuff, but we've basically selected them. And the way we were able to do that was by putting those artifacts in, those moments that matter were really pivotal in that we could articulate to the different vendors that we were talking to. Yes, you've got a big HR system, it does everything for everyone. Actually, how do we differentiate that? How do we look at hundreds and hundreds of different capabilities? We'll look at these moments that matter. We shared them with the vendors and say, tell us what you do to meet those. And that gave us a really focused way of being able to objectively and transparently compare between those, and makes, obviously there's other things as well, like the technology, the cost, all of those things, but in terms of the requirement, the functional requirements, it gave us a really easy and transparent way of being able to compare between the products, which was hugely beneficial and was really the only way we managed to get through them in the time that we did. And for what it's worth, it's noted on there, but the chosen solutions were SAP SuccessFactors, which we're currently starting to implement, and Accenture to help with the delivery. They're going to be our transformation and systems integration partner over the next 18 months or so. A massively challenging 18 months ahead, I think, to do all of that. This is where the hard work genuinely really does start, but I think with the foundations that we've laid.